What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Plant the Spear Game Day Week 4. We got a full slate to talk about today. Of course, we're going to get to Florida State versus Cal. This is an interesting one, Michael. This is actually a game of first, right?
Yeah.
This is the first meeting between these two programs, the first ACC game for Cal. It's going to be either the first loss for them or the first win for us. So this is a game of first, but we're going to get into that one. We have a preview coming up later. It's a night game. It technically on paper is sold out. I don't know if it's going to be sold out in nature by how many people actually show up, but hopefully Florida State can get into the win column for the first time in 2024. Then we have some other things to talk about. We got the ACC's, the rumors of the ACC settlement. We don't know anything is concrete for sure, but there's some talks heating up out there that things may be coming to an end here in this lawsuit. So we're going to get into the details of that. We also have some week 3 reactions and some week 4 predictions. So we got a fun show for you guys. Of course, we're going to keep it always Florida State centric. But we got some other things to talk about outside of Florida State with some national college perspective, just to kind of make it fun for you guys. Because, hey, we're 0-3, so you got to find something else to talk about every now and then. And of course, we're going to wrap this thing up with a Florida State Cal prediction. So, Michael, thank you for joining me, my friend. And how are you? Are you ready to get into this week 4 game day show?
Yes. It's week 4. Listen, even though Florida State has stole our joy, we are lovers of college football. And in the great words of the basketball coach, John Calipari, we can't let them steal our joy anymore. We got to get our joy back. So no matter what they do this weekend, we're going to have fun. We're going to love college football. Not a great slate of games this week, Jesse,
Not
for
really.
sure. It's kind of weird. Usually you have like the terrible slate, like week 2, week 3, but now we're week 4 and that slate's still continuing. But it'll still be a great Saturday. And, it'd be nice if I could wake up Sunday morning and be thinking about a Florida State dub, but probably not.
Probably not, but you sure hope so, man. And I agree. I'm still going to tune in and watch on Saturday, but it isn't the greatest slate of games. But that doesn't mean there's not some good ones there that we can talk about. Of course, we'll all be tuned in at 7 p.m. Saturday night to check out Florida State versus Cal. And I would be remiss if I didn't say the level of dedication here to my co-host here. Happy birthday to Michael. It is his birthday today, so he's showing up on his birthday. Michael, I'm sure there's probably a lot of things that you would like for your birthday as you blow your candles out on your cake. If I were blowing my candles out, I would like to ask for South Alabama's offensive coordinator. I think they put up 87 points last week and then 48 against App State last night. So appreciate you showing up on your birthday. Happy birthday, my man. And then, of course, that would be my wish. So
no, thank you. You know what, Jesse? I think I'm going to take your advice. I think when I blow out my candles today, I'm going to be asking the good Lord in heaven if he could just slide him over on to Florida State and on top of that, just like maybe 4 or 5 just really amazing high school recruiters and about 20 million in NIL money. That's all I want for my birthday. That's
exactly. Maybe a brand new offensive line. So
That'd be nice too.
But speaking of offensive line and offensive coordinators and all that, Alex Atkins is back this week. So,
right.
That is something to keep in mind that we will talk about later in that Cal preview. So hopefully, maybe, I don't know that it's going to be the magic pill for this offense, but it can't hurt. So
right.
Before we jump into this, first off, I want to bring you a word from today's sponsor, and that is our friends over at the Autograph app. Look, if you're a sports fan, and whether it's Florida State or not, whether you want to hear about Florida State or not, the Autograph app fuels your fandom. It is a sports fan's best friend. They got coverage from over 275 different teams in multiple different leagues: NFL, NBA, NHL, MLB, college football, all the above, podcasts, articles, replay features. They got everything that you need over there. It's completely free, and you get rewarded with fan coins for using the app. So make sure you go over there and check that out. I'll link it below so you guys can go grab it. That is the Autograph app. So with that being said, Michael, let's first look back to week 3, and let's do some week 3 reactions. Of course, we know the one we don't want to talk about, and that's Florida State versus Memphis. Yeah. We've already kind of hashed that out in the post game. I feel like we're at that point, like, when you talk about the stages of grief and it's like anger and denial and all that. Like, I've been angry. I've denied that we were this bad. I think I'm coping now. Like, it is what it is, man. This team is not good. Hopefully they can get better. I think they had chances to win that game. The defense actually showed some life in that one, but you still lose 20-12. really, I feel like your hope is that if this defense can show up again this week and the offense can find any sort of life, you can have a chance to win some games because they did look pretty good. I mean, it was their best rush defense of the season. They actually, got some pressures, which I want to talk about later in the preview. I don't want to spend too much time on that now. But of course, we'd be remiss if we didn't initially talk about that 20-12 loss. So another disappointment by Florida State, but hopefully they can rebound this week. But it's going to be tough, man, because Memphis is not a bad squad. Cal looks pretty good right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the 5 stages of grief is denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. I think you and I both went from denial, anger in the first game, Georgia Tech, to bargaining and depression against
Boston
College, to basically acceptance against Memphis. Like,
yeah,
it's like, this is what it is.
Yep.
Again, going back and looking at that game, we did all this, and we'd encourage you guys to go watch the PTS post game.
Goodness
reaction.
gracious. The hate watchers are still here. That was our most watched episode
exactly.
ever.
It was over 8,000 views I last saw. It's awesome. And so thank you guys so much for just being a part of this thing that we do here. But yeah, I mean, it's just you keep looking at it, and the definition of insanity is keep doing the same thing, expecting a different result. And it seems to be what Mike Norvell's doing is he keeps rolling out DJ with this terrible offensive line. I will say that the defense did put on a better effort through that game. Honestly, the fact that they held Memphis to 20 was a huge deal. I mean, they got put in some really bad situations, with the second play from scrimmage fumble by Rodale Williams, the interception. They got put in some really bad situations, and they held that offense to just 20 points. FSU had every chance to score, but man, that offense is just abysmal. And so, 0-3, it's where we are. Definitely not where we thought we would be, but this is the situation we're in. So we've accepted it.
Yeah, I know, right? As sad as that is. And of course, like I said, we're going to spend a good little bit of time talking about that Cal matchup later. But yeah, man, I mean, if you can get another effort like that from the defense, they just get gaslit by this offense not being able to help them out because, we talked about it going into that game. Memphis had scored 20 plus points in 29 consecutive games. And had you not had the stupid things like the punt and all that stuff, maybe you'd almost snap that streak. I mean, you had a chance there. So we'll see, maybe. But, I do want to mention when you talk about this offensive line, I do encourage you guys. Earlier this week, I did record an episode and I did put out an article about what I think is the root cause of the problems at Florida State, and that it is the offensive line. And look, whether we see a new quarterback this week or not, that offensive line is still terrible. And so I do encourage you to go watch that. It is a little bit of a nerding out episode where we go through a ton of stuff. But I really think if you're a Florida State fan, I don't want you to watch that episode. I need you to watch that episode because it's going to make a lot of sense why Florida State has trouble sustaining success because of the way this program is built and versus other programs that have sustained success.
Yeah. And I'll just say this, guys, if you've been with PTS for some time, I was a fan of PTS before I was on the show and part of this thing. Jesse does incredible work where he digs into this. I'm saying that because I'm trying to set this up. This is his best work. I spent time reading through this, and man, me as a football junkie, I was like so just enthralled with the depthness of what Jesse went through to figure out where this problem is. And he has hit the jackpot on this. This is the reason we are 0-3 right now. Yes, there are other underlying factors to this, but the biggest reason, the majority reason, is this offensive line. So, man, you got some time, get on YouTube, take a moment of your time to read through it, or read it on the Plant the Spear website as well, too. But this is Jesse's best work. And I don't say that because I'm just part of this. I don't just give out compliments. This is literally really good. Mike Norvell, if you're watching, go read the article, okay?
Right. I do appreciate that, man. I mean, I love doing stuff like that. It's just sometimes you get caught up so busy that you don't really have time. And, to me, it's like CSI of college football, when you really start figuring that stuff out. So speaking of misery, welcome to the table, Florida. Another week, another loss for Florida. Man, again, like that game in November is going to be aired on probably Nickelodeon, maybe Cartoon Network. Maybe even I was talking to my friend the other day. He's like, maybe the Hallmark Channel.
Yeah,
it's
a murder.
It's going to be a murder mystery or whatever. So, we'll have to see how that goes. But Florida takes another loss in this one to Texas A&M, 33-20. And I do think it is interesting, man. Like, this Florida team has looked bad, but the way you saw that Notre Dame game go with Texas A&M, and then you saw them lose to Northern Illinois, and then Miami whooped up on Florida. Again, it's not to take away from what Miami's doing, but it's kind of like, okay, well, I mean, Florida's pretty bad. Like,
Yeah.
it's hard to take away that Miami's going to be, a playoff. I mean, they probably will be a playoff contender, but really a national championship contender when Florida's just looking really terrible. And
Yep.
really, I mean, they lose that game at home, 33-20, which doesn't look too terrible by 13 points, but that game was 33-7 late in the third
Correct.
quarter. So, the beating had already ensued. Now I will say the thing about the way Florida's handling it, there's not a whole lot of sense that's made with this because, Michael, the old story is, or the saying is, if you have two quarterbacks, you have none.
That's right.
And they really are kind of doing that two quarterback system between Lagway and Mertz right now. Now, part of me is a little jealous. Like, Mike, can we see a little two quarterback system? Because Lagway is doing some things. And so I think the other conversation in that is we don't know what's going on with Billy Napier. Like, I feel like he's either A, a dead man walking, or B, he's on life support and just doesn't know it yet, but it's coming. And really, I think when you look at Billy, man, they lost some games in ways that they couldn't lose early in the season. They lost some winnable games bad early in the season. And so, they still haven't played Georgia. They still haven't played Tennessee. They still got some of these really, really tough games coming up. And so unless a miracle happens, and I don't see that happening, chances are Billy's getting fired this year. And I really do think, my gut tells me that it's probably going to be Lane Kiffin that takes over that job. I would hate to see that happen because I think he could be successful there. But, the thing is, like, when you do a coaching change, a lot of times you can start making these inroads. But with Ole Miss being a legitimate playoff contender this year, an SEC contender this year, you really, really have to do your best to keep that under wraps, because that would be absolutely tragic to have that news break and then Ole Miss falls apart. And I know there is some conversation where people are like, why would you leave Ole Miss for Florida? I don't think it's even a question. I mean, you look
Not
at
a question.
Right. You look at where they're located in the most talent rich state in the country. You look at the money that they have. I mean,
Prestige of Florida.
Right. Like, there's rumors that the boosters have already raised $20 million to buy Billy out. And so, like, I think he would take it, and I would not be excited about Lane Kiffin ended up in Florida. But yeah, another blowout loss for Florida. And now, I mean, I think Billy's seat is, I think it's so hot. It's like cartoons where it's turned into ashes and it's crumbled and he's just waiting to fall down.
Oh man, it's gotta be super hot. And I think, like, I'm with you. I would not want Lane Kiffin at Florida just because that recruiting prowess. Yes, he has leveraged a lot of the portal. He's become basically the new portal king over Mike Norvell. But he also can recruit as well. He always has dynamic offenses. I'd rather him stay at Ole Miss. But yeah, it's a no-brainer. But yes, if I was at Ole Miss, even if I won a national title at Ole Miss and Florida came calling, I'd be gone to Florida just because you got way more resources, way more prestige, a bigger fan base. You're in bigger rivalries. You're in games that really, Ole Miss plays games that matter, but at Florida, you play games that matter.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think with Billy, man, such a nice guy. Everybody you talk to, they love his character and who he is. But from day one, it has been a unequivocally all systems failure with Billy Napier. I mean, it's just not been good. I mean, he's wasted the talent there. They've not been able to put together constructive, good seasons. They look even there hasn't shown any depth of improvement over this team.
Right.
You have what some claim to be potentially a generational quarterback, and he's being trogged around by a quarterback who's done after this year, and Graham Mertz. And so, there's speculation that the board had their meeting, that they've already determined that they were going to let him go, but they're just going to let him finish out the season. That could be the possibility. Jesse, it could be a possibility. This is wild. It could be a possibility that they let him come back for one more season.
I don't think that's going to happen, man. I don't think the Florida boosters are going to be okay with that. But, I think Steve Spurrier did come out and even say to rock with him for a little bit more, give him a little bit more time. And people are so fire happy nowadays.
Yep.
But I do think it does kind of come down to and I know there's been some ridiculous comparisons here between Mike Norvell and Willie Taggart, but like, I think it's when you look at the Willie Taggart situation, it was year 2. Now, granted, he's in year 3, and things just weren't looking any better. Like you said, you hadn't seen any progress. And so I think that's where it's at. Now, of course, if Lane Kiffin were to leave to come to Florida, obviously that comes with more expectations. So, you can't just get by with a 10-win season at Florida, which is why we're so mad at Florida State, because, again, the standard is high here. But, again, this isn't Plant the Gator podcast, so we're gonna keep it moving here. Man, I'm disappointed in my guys down in Columbia. I had my Super Cat pick last week for South Carolina to pull the outright upset over LSU. I guess one of my cat lost one of his lives on that one. LSU came back in a last-second field goal, hit the game winner, 36-33. South Carolina had some pretty wild penalty luck there that kind of screwed them out of that game. But, man, I mean, I thought they could pull it off, and they dang sure almost did. But LSU does get the win there down in Columbia.
Yeah, it was a close game. I had LSU covering. This was like one of my other side locks. It was like because, South Carolina had destroyed Kentucky, so everybody was putting money on them. So I was for sure that LSU would cover this game. They ended up winning, but not by much, which tells you that defense. If I'm Brian Kelly, man, I must have like I must be allergic to good defensive coordinators.
I know. The USC of the SEC essentially now. But I will say, like, talking about hot seats, man, that game right there, I mean, Shane Beamers is already hot, and then Brian Kelly, like, if they don't start doing something, man, LSU's not – that's another place like Florida. And Florida State, they're not going to tolerate losing for very long. Missouri sneaks past Boston College 27-21. We bring this one up because of the way, Florida State lost to Boston College. Missouri was the number 6 team in that game. And so Boston College was 24th. They played good. It was on the road at Missouri. We talked about this and last week. I was like, man, Missouri, they find ways to win, and kudos to them because goodness gracious, we sure don't.
Yeah,
but
right.
they're always that team that's like in the top 10, but they're not dominant like a top 10 team. And so that's why last week I had them winning, but I had BC covering on that 15.5-point spread. And because that's a lot of points, man. But BC does play decent, and they had them early. I mean, they had Missouri on the ropes, but then Missouri does get the comeback. Maybe if that was not in Missouri, maybe it goes the other way. But yeah, Missouri gets the win there over Boston College.
Yeah. I thought Missouri would come out and exert their dominance, but Boston College, you have to give it to Bill O'Brien. He's got that team humming right now. They didn't get the win, but they look pretty good in that game, and so kind of goes to show you that, man. Again, Florida State wasted another opportunity.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think Boston College is ever going to be like a top tier program, but I think if Bill O'Brien decides he wants to stay long enough, he can actually turn that into a very respectable program. Now, Oregon finally woke up this week after 2 really kind of sleeper games against Idaho and Boise State. They come out and they smash their rival Oregon State 49-14. Florida State, wake up. Hello.
Wake up.
Like someone else is doing this. Can we do this already? So, I mean, DJU's former program gets smashed. So Oregon finally woke up and looked like the Oregon that we expected them to. I don't know how good Oregon State is. They got a new coach there, new quarterback, so we'll have to see. But they finally did wake up, man. And I know they got Ohio State coming up real soon.
Yes.
So they picked a good time to do it.
No, they really did, which makes me really mad because I had Oregon State covering. I had Oregon winning. But yeah, finally, because you're just kind of wondering, like they were going into this season, they're supposed to be this really great team and they'd struggle out of the gates, but now they're finally starting to figure themselves out.
Yeah. And then lo and behold, little did we know, Notre Dame does have an offense. This is not what I wanted to see. I mean, honestly, I was kind of rolling with the struggle against A&M.
Yeah.
Got upset by NIU. I'm like, all right, we can keep this one relatively close. And then they smashed Purdue 66-7. Again, we talk about the response here. Now, I understand App State is looking really bad right now.
Right.
But you see Clemson come out after that Georgia game, smash App State and have that response. You see Notre Dame come out after the upset over NIU, smash Purdue, a Power 4 Big Ten team. Florida State, it's time to respond. You have got to do something. So their offense looked terrible the 2 weeks before, and then they come out and score 66 points against Purdue. Now, again, that's not the Purdue of old.
Right.
But, I mean, you cannot ask for a better rebound game than to beat them by 59 points.
Yeah, I mean, you saw Riley Leonard at his best in that game. You saw that offense finally step up. Playmakers make plays. They started winning one-on-one battles. Offensive line started blocking better. And look and behold, you score 66 points. If I'm Florida State, you guys sense a theme here, how we keep bringing it back to Florida State. If I'm Florida State, man, I'm going to say, hey, how do we capture whatever that was? How do we respond? That's one of Mike Norvell's thing is response. They haven't been responding. They've just been taking beatings.
Right. And it's funny, like, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but this is one of my favorite, I don't know, do you say GIF or GIF or
Oh,
GIF's
I say GIF. Yeah.
See, GIF is peanut butter to me, so
Yeah.
I say GIF. But you know that GIF from Scared Straight where like the kid's sleeping in his bunk and the guards come in and wake him up and he's
Yes.
just like, "Oh crap, I gotta go!" Like someone needs to go in there and scare Florida State and just wake us
Exactly.
up. Like, come on. But then the next one to talk about here is Washington State upsets Washington. Now, probably nobody on east of the Mississippi cares about this score. But the reason I brought this one up, and I find that it's interesting, is Washington State obviously lost Cam Ward. They are not a perennial great team, but then they go in and they upset the team. Now that game was close last year, even then, like Washington won on a last second field goal, and it is a rivalry game. But I think when you look at Washington, that's a team. They lost their coach. You didn't, but they
Right.
lost Michael Penix, that dynamic quarterback. They lost the Oduzme. Am I saying that right? The receiver that
Yep.
they had. They lost a couple of other really good players from that team. So I think the whole takeaway with this game is the fact that you see another team that had a lot of success last year, because this is something that I'm kind of working on another piece now about how teams have fallen off or rebounded depending on what
Yep.
they lose in the NFL draft. But this is a team that you see, they are struggling too. Now, they're not struggling as bad as Florida State, but we are not the only one on the struggle bus. So Washington gets upset by Washington State there. And again, like if you're losing to Washington State, you're probably going to lose some more games this year. And with that being said, I do want to transition. This is what I was telling you I was looking up earlier. Here's an interesting stat for you, Michael, because I had someone comment on one of our social media posts that was like, well, Florida State lost 10 plus draft picks, and how often does that happen and all this type of stuff. Well, first off, there have been 32 times where teams have lost a 10 plus draft picks. Now, Florida State, which first off, kudos to Florida State, man. When I was pulling some of these numbers, Florida State has had 10 plus draft picks a lot compared to some teams that you think would have a lot and have not. They have one of the highest amounts of 10 plus draft pick seasons, but Florida State has lost 10 plus draft picks on 3 other occasions: 1995, 2013, and 2015. But the drop off was not nearly severe. In the years that followed, in 95, now remember, when you say the year 95,
Right.
you have to go to the season before, because
Correct.
it's 1 year after. In 1995, they bounced back and went 10-2. In 2013, they went 14-0 and won a national championship.
That's right.
And in 2015, they went 10-3. So this is where it's like, I understand losing 10 draft picks it's detrimental to your roster, right? And we talked about how we didn't think they were going to go undefeated necessarily because they lost so much. But there's a lot of teams, including yourself, that has lost that many draft picks and went on to still have success. And the difference between those teams is recruiting, flat out. Now, the data is not available back in 1995, but almost all these classes around these two 2013, 2015 teams, because again, man, that's 20 draft picks within 2 years that you lost there, within 3 seasons. They were all top 10, top 15. So that's why we say the recruiting has to get better here if you're going to sustain success. But yeah, man, I mean, it's impressive to have 10 guys go in the draft, but this is a collapse of epic proportions.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you hit the nail on the head right there. It's that it's recruiting. It's one thing when you look at that 95 team, that 2013 team, that they were able to lose 10 plus draft picks, but then they had the foundation of the next class of the of really, really good players coming behind those draft picks to fill in. The difference between those two, or those 3 classes, and what's happening now is the fact that those 10 plus draft picks, they were the foundation and they were the superstars. So when they left, Mike Norvell and crew tried to replace them with other transfer portal players, and those have been busts. It's the first time in the Mike Norvell era at Florida State that he has had more busts than boom, at least right now. In the transfer portal evaluation. Now, whether that's because they were lazy this time of evaluation around or they misevaluated, we don't know, but we can see the evidence on the field. And so I think that's a bigger issue, is that the foundation of the player system, the recruiting, we've had way more transfers than the high school recruiting. And so when those transfers leave, we don't have enough high school kids that are either there or ready enough to play, that you don't see such a massive drop off. I mean, this is a la 2020, 2021-esque of Florida State. That's what this team feels like. Now, on paper, we've already said this at the beginning of the season, they're in the top, 10 or top 13 of the 247 composite
Yeah.
ranking of talent. Like
Number 13. Yeah.
number 13, they should not have fallen this far.
No.
So that goes to show you that the talent evaluation and the foundation was not there for this past season, which allowed this epic fail to happen.
Yeah, and that's how you fix this going forward. Is you have to recruit better, and maybe the changes come after the end of the season to do that.
Yeah.
But continuing on with the week 3 reactions, Miami continues to get fat on some cupcakes here, beating Ball State 62-0. And I know you guys live in our comment section. Like, our post game reaction show was probably more Miami fans than Florida State fans. Hey, look, again, live it up. You guys are I mean, really, Miami, when you talk about this, like, Miami has recruited better than Florida State over the past few years. So
Yes.
the chances of them sustaining success is probably better than Florida State's right now. But also, we know that Miami has not sustained success for a very long time. They're one quarterback injury away from their season coming off the rails, just like Florida State's kind of did, even though we were able to go win. They're going to lose a lot this year. And I do have to say, it is funny in the comments. They're like, well, you guys went too transfer portal heavy and all this stuff, and you shouldn't rely that heavily on transfers. I'm like, if it wasn't for a transfer quarterback and a transfer running back and a transfer linebacker and a transfer, here, there, and everywhere, I'm like, half of your best players are transfers. 11 starters on that team are transfers. So, like, this, it remains to be seen whether this is a flash in the pan season for Miami or not.
Right.
But this will probably spark more good recruiting for them. So they could manage to do that. But they talk about the lack of development. I'm like, well, how come Ja'Cory Brown ain't playing quarterback for you this year? You had to go to the portal. But this isn't the Miami show. I know you guys are going to get pissed and talk about it in the comments. That's fine. Hey, whatever. But again, get fat off cupcakes, 62-0 over Ball State. South Florida, they got to go to Tampa this week, so that could be a better test. Now, again, it's still South Florida.
That's right.
I don't think they're really going to face a test till they get to that Louisville game on the road, but Miami continues to roll 62-0.
Yeah, listen, Miami has played well. They look well. Cam Ward looks better. Miami looks like they won the lottery between the
I had you guys in the top 5 last week, so don't come after me.
Exactly, right? They looked better. They look good. So I'm going to give them their kudos, man. They look good. They're winning games. They're winning the games they're supposed to. Great job, Miami. We'll see what it's like when you actually start facing some real hard teams, starting with the UCF game. Now it's USC, sorry,
There's a lot
South
of US
Florida. I know there's way too many of them. This is South Florida. So again, they played Alabama really tough at home last year. They played Alabama until the fourth quarter this year. So will they give Miami a game? We'll see. I have Miami rolling in that game for sure. And kudos to Miami. You guys look great.
Yeah.
You still haven't won anything in 20 years.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And you haven't won anything yet this year either. Because,
exactly.
You still got some tough teams out there waiting for you. So we'll see. But I mean, they do look good. I got to give them credit for that. But again, man, for the record, Miami fans, I don't care if we're 12-0 or 0-12. We're going to talk a little bit of smack here. And I know you're going to talk smack back. That's fine. That's how college football works.
That's the beauty of the rivalry.
Exactly. And, you might be hate watching, but you're still running our numbers up. So I appreciate
that. That's
right. So appreciate it. And hey, we're Battles End members, so the more you run the numbers up, you're actually helping Florida State get better in the long run. So hey, it is what it is. Thanks for your support. The next one here is Ole Miss beat Wake Forest so bad they canceled next year's game. So the fastest growing brand in America is now the fastest growing chicken in the country. I mean, that's crazy. Like I think they paid $1.3 million to get out of the game. Now, I will mention that it has come out since then. They did schedule a game against Oregon State next year. And the rumor is that Oregon State is helping to cover some of those losses from them paying out that $1.3 million or whatever it was. Because, Oregon State, they got to schedule some people right now. They're having a tough time scheduling with being in the 2-pack or 6-pack or whatever it's going to be whenever it's going to be that. So there is that too. But man, that is, it's like Lane Kiffin said, like that's a kind of an unwritten rule that you don't do that because teams have to schedule so far in advance. But man, beat them into a $1.3 million buyout. That's pretty rough.
Yeah, well, the fastest growing brand in America decided, we can't be taking these hits on our brand right now. So they had to get out of that game against Ole Miss. It's absolutely ridiculous. I can't stand Wake Forest. They deserve everything they get.
Exactly. And then the last week 3 reaction we have here is, man, Tennessee might be the best team in the country. I mean, you see the way they absolutely rolled NC State. And then this week, I believe it wasn't a Kent State or something like that, kind of a nobody there. I think it was 30-0, and they kicking onside kicks. And like, I
In
mean,
the first quarter.
right. Like that's unreal, man. That's just unfair. That's mean. But looks like they are running. I
That's
mean,
mean.
that's
Why y'all
just
being
mean.
mean,
That's
Tennessee?
that's just rude. Let them guys have a chance. Or maybe not, because I think it was 40-something-0 at halftime.
Yeah.
God, my goodness. So Tennessee, man, they look really, really good. And like I gotta say, man, the SEC's got some juggernauts this year. So it's gonna be interesting to see how it plays out.
I,
Um, Go ahead.
yeah, I'm not there yet. So depending on how this Tennessee Oklahoma game goes, I'm about ready to make them my national title favorite. Like,
Yeah.
because they were my double dog super lock last week against Kent State, and they proved me every bit right. You might hear another one of that today in our predictions for week 4, just because I just love this. I love their quarterback, Nico. My goodness, he
Yeah.
reminds me so much of like watching Jameis Winston, just accurate, poise in the pocket, isn't shaken by much. I mean, this dude's a true freshman. I mean, he's making $8 million a year, but he's a true freshman. So we'll see how he plays this weekend against Oklahoma State, or Oklahoma. But if they pull it out like I think they will, then yeah, that's going to be my national title favorite.
Yeah, this will be the one big test for them, right? And Oklahoma hasn't looked good by
Nope.
any means, but at the same time, I don't think dominating NC State is really that's not showing a whole lot, because they're looking pretty rough this year. Now, I did skip over one, but it's a good time to talk about it because we're talking about SEC, and that is Bama dominates Wisconsin 42-10. That was one that we thought, like, how are they going to respond after that South
Right.
Florida game? Are they going to go in there and play a tight game on the road? They should dominate Wisconsin. Wisconsin is not a great team, but it is on the road in a decently tough environment. But then that parlays into Georgia sneaks by a Kentucky team
Ooh.
by 1 point that just got blown out by South Carolina. So those two teams are going to meet in 2 weeks. They're both on a bye this week, so they have a chance to kind of get some things cleaned up there. I'm sure Kirby's going to be chewing into some tail this week to try and get that team motivated. But, man, the thing is with Georgia, they always have that 1 or 2 games a year where they had the Auburn game last year. They trailed South Carolina in that same season. So they always have that 1 or 2 games a year that's really like, man, what are they going to be that good? And then they just go like, I think it was last year, like they had the close win against Auburn, and then they beat Ole Miss like 52-7. So like, what Georgia are you going to get coming after this bye week? But man, that Georgia Bama game is going to be huge. And then again, like you have Georgia who has to play Alabama. Then you got Texas in 2 weeks after that, so in the next month, and then you have Tennessee down the road. So, man, there's going to be – I think Georgia's going to take some losses this year, but, Tennessee's going to have some tough tests. Alabama's going to have some tough tests because it's still Georgia, man. They're still a really quality program. But, yeah, man, there's going to be some real juggernaut battles coming up in the SEC coming up real soon.
Well, I just think it's super interesting when you look at that Georgia team. I mean, look what they did to Clemson. And Clemson, I would say, is a better defense than Kentucky's defense. Now, Kentucky's defense is really good. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But I think Clemson has a way better defense. And look what they did to Clemson. And then they go and play Kentucky, which now, granted, usually Kentucky, Georgia at Kentucky at Kroger Field is pretty much usually a close game.
Yeah.
So I'll give Kentucky that. But, and I'll say this, Kentucky had so many chances to win that game.
They
oh my
won
gosh,
that game,
the drop or the call that was, they said it wasn't a pick six, even though I think it was a pick six. The Mark Stoops not going for it there on 4th and 8, thinking you're going to get the ball back. Are you kidding me?
You knew
you got a chance to beat the number 1 team in the country. You got to go for it there. Regardless of that, Georgia proved its mental, was able to pull it out. Here's the thing, though. Georgia has won 41, 42 straight regular season games. You know who their loss? With the exception of Alabama. Alabama's beaten them twice. There's the only 2 losses they have in that stretch. Now, Nick Saban isn't roaming the sidelines. I think Kirby Smart made sure. I think he called up his old buddy Nick and said, Nick, now you sure you're not coaching this game, right? Are you sure? Okay.
Just come stand on the sideline for this game because we need that omen. Now, it's not in Atlanta, but it is in Tuscaloosa, so that's going to be a big one. And, I was talking to a Georgia friend of mine yesterday, and I was saying that, like, you really – this is – like, even if Georgia goes 10-2, or, I don't think they're going to go 9-3, but even if they go 10-2, they got Alabama, Tennessee, and Texas. That's some tough games. And I think Texas is in Athens. Tennessee is on the road. And then Alabama's on the road, but if you go 10-2, they can still very well
Oh
make
yeah.
it into the playoffs.
Oh
But
yeah.
I was telling my friend, I'm like, man, you got to think about it. Like, this is really one of the first times in a long time that Georgia's had a tough regular season
That's
schedule.
right.
I always joke with my Georgia friends, like, man, I think we play Alabama more than Georgia does, and we're in the ACC, so like it is, and LSU's the same way. So like it is interesting to see how they're going to do against that tough schedule. But yeah, man, that's going to be interesting to see. Now, I mean, it's funny though. You talk about Mark Stoops, like here we are taking senseless chances going for 2 against Memphis, and then like you have the number 1 team a chance to win, and you don't go for it. Like maybe Mark Stoops and Mike Norvell need to mesh into one person, but
Mark Norvell, coach.
Mark Norvell, right? That is funny, but I gotta say that Brock Vandergrift kid is he's pretty good
He's
now. Now
pretty good.
he was a former 5-star, so that shouldn't be a
That's right.
surprise there. So week 3 did give us some gems, and hopefully week 4 will be the same. But we're going to switch gears here for a minute before we jump into week 4, and we're going to talk about this ACC settlement news. We're going to bring things back to Florida State real quick. And there has been some meetings. We talked about this before on a previous show where there was the meetings, the 6-hour meeting between all these presidents and things like that. Michael filled us in on that. And Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports has recently put out an article kind of stirring the pot on what this is. Now, there's not a lot of news come out. Nothing's concrete. Nobody's agreed to anything, but there's enough meat on the bone here that I feel like we can at least talk about it for a few minutes. And there's 2 ways to look at this, right? And we both agree on at least half of this. At the end of the day, the long-term picture out of this, you cannot stay in the ACC. You have to get out of here. And we're talking about the 10-year time frame, 15,
Right.
20 years down the road. You got to get to one of those power 2s. You need to be in the Big 10. You need to be in the SEC. You cannot hang here. This is a sinking ship. But, maybe they've temporarily patched the hole,
Right.
so the sinking could be slow, because I think there are some good aspects to this. And so the rumor right now is that the grant of rights is going to be shortened, and they will potentially look at having a separate pot of money to go to the teams based on what they bring in from a TV viewership standpoint. Now, we know the ACC did come back last year, which after Florida State campaigned for the performance initiatives, and they put that in place, and that can pay a team up to around, I think, 20 to 25 million in additional money. And that's great. Like that's great because you have some teams that carry this conference from a success on the field standpoint. But we were talking about this before the show. Wake Forest, it's like they say, a blind pig can find an acorn every once in a while.
Right.
Like Wake Forest can luck up and get a Sam Hartman and an A.T. Perry and go win, have a couple 11-win seasons, and now they're back where they're at.
Right.
Florida State can go have a 3-6 season and a 5-7 season, and they're still bringing in more of a TV draw than they are. And at the end of the day, the pot of money is not based on wins and losses. It's based on who's watching TV and bringing in this revenue. So to me, I think this is kind of how it should go in the first place. Now, unequal revenue has not particularly worked well in the past, but this is a bit of a unique situation, because one of the things for me here is, and why I think it's okay to do this, is now the Big 12 may have been somewhat similar because that's who tried unequal revenue in the past and it didn't really work out. The ACC, like when you look at the SEC and the Big 10, their TV metrics, their TV rankings, sure, you have the Ohio States, the Michigans, the Alabamas, the Georgias that are up top. But the gap between those teams, outside of like a Vanderbilt or a Rutgers or the ones way down at the bottom, that's not that far off. Like you have a lot of these teams jammed up in the top 20 of TV ratings. The ACC is totally different. Now, when you look at 2022, just to throw some numbers at you here real quick, in 2022, Clemson was 10th in TV rankings. Florida State was 15th. The third best team in the ACC was NC State, all the way down at 43rd. So that gap was massive. Now, it closed a little bit last year. Florida State was at 7th with 3.58 million average weekly viewers. Clemson had a bad season by all means. They were 22nd still at 1.7 million. Then you had Louisville, Miami, and Duke, 31, 32, 33 at around 1.3 million. And then UNC down at 46. So you can see you have that top layer, and then you kind of have a little gap, and then you have a way big drop off. So the fact that you would pay these two schools more money is because the proportion that they are bringing in TV revenue is not like the other conferences. It's not even remotely close. These two bring in a Brinks truck, and Wake Forest is walking in with their piggy bank, with a couple with a couple pennies here. So I think that's why you have to do that, and I think it's important because you have to also tell the piggy bank schools, like, listen, if the Brinks trucks pull out, you're going to be stuck holding a piggy bank. That's all you got. You can't go to the bank and borrow anymore. So I think that is important there. And I think from just a revenue standpoint, like if you can get, I don't know what it's going to be, $10, $20 million. If you can bridge the gap, you're probably not going to meet what the SEC and the Big Ten are getting. You're probably not. But if you can get close to that, it helps. I mean, everything helps from this standpoint, because I think the couple things you got to look at too is when you factor in the grant of rights shortening, and the rumor right now is to be around 2030. That's what they're looking at. That knocks 6 years off. That's a long time, because we have already basically announced that if we haven't announced that we're leaving by the end of this year, we're going to play in 2025 in the ACC. That's already a foregone conclusion. It's only 5 more years. And I know that's 5 more years, but if you're getting 10 to 20 million more for those 5 more years, the ACC has grown their revenue. They have done okay at that. It at least gets you closer. And I think the reasons that that is important is, first off, the Big Ten media deal renews in 2030. And also, you have to keep in mind, like we talked about before in all the realignment episodes, the SEC will bring you in as a full share member. The Big Ten will not. So if you can come in as a full share member in 2030, that gets you going right out of the gate with a full Big Ten share. Now, will that happen? We don't know. But this also gives Florida State more time to get that AAU accreditation, which the school has already come out and said they're working towards getting that in 2027. There's no guarantee, but you have a longer runway to get there. For what it's worth, the ACC or the SEC renews in 2033, 34. So you'd still have a little bit of a gap there. And then the last thing I want to say before I kick it to you, Michael, is why I think this is good is, so if you can knock 6 years off that grant of rights, that's huge, right? You still got to get out, but you also have to look at where Florida State's at right now. Like, this season was a perfect storm of bad stuff, right?
Yeah.
This is the one way you couldn't start, because you are going to go through some things that are going to dry up donations to a degree. You're going to have down attendance, which is going to hurt your revenue a little bit there. But you also, if you negotiate, like, look, 2030, the grant of rights is over, we're walking away, and you walk away for scot-free, no money. Florida State currently, right now, if you were to try and leave and have to pay a big buyout in 27-ish, one, you're still trying to pay for that football-only facility that you have not built yet, that you're working on, but you haven't built yet. You're funding a, $200 million stadium renovation as well. Now you might have to pay out a sizable amount of buyouts at the end of this year for these coaches that just got extensions that you're going to have to end up footing that cash for. So, like, you are going to be staring down the barrel of a lot of cash that you have to burn to get through this 25, 26 period, through all of those things, from the football only, basically the facility renovations, the coaching buyouts. You're also going to have the house settlement coming up, which we don't know when that's going to be finalized. That's going to cost them some more money. So to me, if you can up your payday, you can shorten the grant of rights, and you can walk away for less money, which allows you to kind of get out from under some of these big costs that you're funding right now and help you pay for those. I think this is a net positive. Now, you still got to leave. I just think it depends on, and only Florida State's lawyers know this. We don't, and the ACC lawyers probably know this, and Clemson for that matter too. It just really depends on how good of a chance you think you have of actually getting out, and how good of a chance you think you have of landing somewhere else. So, like, if you think that's a bad chance, this is good, right? If you think that's a good chance, maybe you don't want to take this. But I think it's still a net positive either way. It's going to look like a loss. You're going to get clowned for this, but at the end of the day, you're getting more revenue and you're getting out sooner. So it's kind of a win-win situation either way.
Yeah, listen, here's where I'll start. By 2030, the SEC is projected to be at $105.3 million payout per school. The Big Ten is projected to be at $94.5 million payout per school. The ACC by 2030 is projected to be at $55.3 million payout per school, okay? Which is basically almost a $60 million deficit that you're running every year up until that point, almost every year. Right? So last year, the ACC per school got paid out $36.3 million, okay? Big Ten got paid out $58.9 million. SEC got paid out $56 million per year, okay? That number is just going to keep on increasing. Why am I saying all that? Is because what this secret meeting and this potential deal tells you is, one, the ACC, and this is just speculation, feels like it's losing the lawsuit right now.
Right.
Right? Because that's the only reason they would come to make this settlement anything possible. Number two, if this settlement wasn't if there weren't real smoke with this settlement, you would have already had anonymous ACC presidents coming out bashing this thing, saying there's no way they're going to give this up, blah, 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 blah. Jim Phillips would have come out and said something. Have you noticed anything? No, it's been eerily silent. Why? Because this is real smoke. The ACC is trying to figure out how in the world do they save this conference at least till 2030. So in my estimation, I think what Florida State should do is, one, this is a leveraging tool. They should not acquiesce at any point right now. They have everything. They have the wind in their sail, as they would say, right? So they should keep this as, okay, thank you for that offer. We'll put that in our pocket. We'll take it into consideration. And then they should go full steam ahead with this lawsuit. Because if you can get out of this conference for $0, and you could be in a new conference by 2026 or 2027 when the original ESPN deal is actually done, right?
Right.
Then you should take it. You should go, because the
100%.
thing is, you do not want to, let's say you take this deal and let's say that they can get you, I don't know, $20 more million. So instead of now being, 30 or 40 million every year, you're now around that 50 range. The SEC is still, and the Big Ten are still going to be around that 70 to 80 range, right? So now you're closer. You're about 60 or so there. You're still 15 to 20 million behind. No, if you can actually be there now, go there. Now, if the only way that I would say we would start cooking with this is if ESPN says, okay, we're going to renew the deal till 2030, right? We're also going to not make you sign a new grants of right. We're actually going to void the old one and just basically say you agree to stay into the conference till 2030. And we are going to get you and Clemson 5 to 10 million behind the SEC and the Big Ten. If they come back and they're going to make your payout closer, where you're only about 5 to 10 million behind the SEC, and they don't make you sign a new grant of rights, and they void the old one and just have an agreement that you're staying till 2030, then I think you actually really seriously listen. Again, it's egg in your face because we made this whole thing about getting out of the ACC and how it was untenable, and all that stuff. So it almost feels like you lose, but in hindsight, you kind of win. That would be the only way, Jesse, the only way I would ever even celebrate a move like this is if they can get us within 5 to 10 million of what the SEC or the Big Ten. If it's nowhere near that, if we're still 10 to 15 million, this is a loss. This is an absolute loss and an embarrassment on the university. So to me, this is just a bargaining chip for FSU to have, for Clemson to have. I don't care about Clemson. I'm just saying they could use it, but for FSU to have, because the ultimate goal is to get the heck out of this conference sooner rather than later.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think really the mystery right now is what that number is, because there are other ways that they pay out for TV. Because I know they paid, I think, around 43 million last year. ACC schools got between around 43 and 46 million in total revenue.
Yeah.
If they can get you an extra 25 million a year, which, man, that's going to really take a bite out of some of the other schools. And I don't know that a team like UNC or something like that is going to agree to that to begin with.
Right.
Because they're one of two, like UVA and UNC, they have no reason to agree to that. But, maybe a Wake Forest and a Boston College, they do. But, I'd wholeheartedly agree. I think it just depends on that number, because if you're still 40, 50, 60 million dollars behind and you got to get out of here anyway, then you just ignore that. But I think it's like you said, man, it's just a sign that, like, if you're getting them to the negotiating table, maybe they know that you got a chance to really win this lawsuit and get out of here. And I think I think you risk losing this deal to get out a lot sooner. I think that's worth the risk. But, again, like I said, I think this is an okay deal if it's the only deal that you got versus just losing the lawsuit and staying in the conference till 2036 at the current payout.
Yeah.
But it's still not your ultimate result. There are positives from it. It just really depends on what that number is. At the end of the day, it depends on what that number comes down to. So we just wanted to touch on that because it is kind of some interesting news. We will have to see. And again, remember that contract has to be signed by February of 2025, and that date is closing in. So you're going to probably see some movement before that happens, because ESPN is going to want to know what they're getting in that deal. Now, let's bring it back to current in-season football. Week 4 is upon us. This will be coming up by the time you watch this. It'll either be game day or coming up game day eve. So like Michael said earlier, there's not a ton of really interesting games this week, but there's enough that we want to talk about and have some fun with here. So we're going to roll into our week 4 picks, and then we're going to get into this Florida State Cal preview and prediction. So let's start with some picks, man. First off, you have a reeling NC State team coming off of, first off, they got blown out by Tennessee. Then they were losing to Louisiana Tech there for a little while. I was like, man, are they about to lose again? But then they pull off the win, but they have to go to Clemson in Death Valley. Clemson is getting 19 points here. That feels like a big number. I think initially I wanted to take that, being the fact that they blew out App State. But then you see South Alabama blows out App State. And so now I don't know how good App State really is. And I also was talking to a friend of mine the other day who's an NC State fan, and they were talking about Grayson McCall's got an injury going on, so they don't even know if he's going to play. I think that is – man, I don't know who's worse off right now. Who screwed up the quarterback takes worse? I thought Grayson McCall was going to be decent at NC State.
Yep.
That's been like them between them and DJU. I think, man, we both want to put that in a box and return to sender on both of ours. I'm going to take Clemson to win this one, and I don't think it's going to be necessarily close.
Yep.
19 points feels like a whole lot here. I could see them winning by about 17. I just don't know. I mean, again, Clemson really hammered App State. I don't know, man. I think I'm going to take Clemson to win. NC State's bad right now. I mean, they are not good. So I want to take NC State to cover this 19 points. Like if it was 16 and a half or something like that, I'd probably take Clemson to cover at 17.
Yeah.
I could see this being a blowout, but Clemson doesn't have Tennessee's offense. But they have a really good defense, and it is in Death Valley. So give me Clemson big, but I don't think they're going to cover by 19. I think it's going to be close to like 17 to 20. So it'll be real close.
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, under Dabo Swinney, Clemson has only not blown out NC State twice at home. Give me Clemson, and I'm taking the 19 points.
I like it, man. We'll see. I mean, like I said, this is one I feel like you could see a blowout happening. It's just, is that offense fool's gold because you beat up on App State? Yep. Is it any better? But their defense is really good, and NC State's offense is terrible. I think this is going to look a lot like Clemson, Florida State, right?
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
You're just not going to be able to do anything against that defensive line. The next one up here is the sad bowl.
The poop bowl, man.
And that is going to be, and it's not involving Florida State. So we'll get to that game in a second. Florida travels to Mississippi State. This is actually the Dan Mullen Bowl.
Oh my gosh, that's right.
We'll see. I hope they're letting him call this game. That would be interesting if he is. I saw he already tweeted about it. Florida is going to Mississippi State. Florida is laying 6 points on this one. Now, Mississippi State is by all means not a good team. They lost to Kenny Dillingham out there in Tempe. But Florida's a disaster. I mean, you got a dead man walking at head coach, kind of. It is year one at Mississippi State, so they are with a new coach there. You know, who knows what Florida's going to do as far as their quarterback system. Man, it's really hard for me to pick Florida to win anything. So at this point, I feel like Florida should win this game. I think they're the better team in this, strangely enough.
Yeah.
I actually did just see that Eugene Wilson, one of their best receivers, is out for this game.
Oh, gosh.
So to me, give me the Fighting Cowbells out in Stark Vegas. I'll take Mississippi State, but give me Florida to cover.
Wow. Okay, so Florida, but if you got Florida covering, that means you got Florida winning because they're the 6 point
excuse me. Yeah, they'll keep it close, but I'm gonna take Mississippi State.
Gotcha. Okay.
Like a squeaker, 3 points.
Man. Okay. Good on you, Jesse. Yeah.
If it was in the swamp, I might go the other way.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Crazy things happen in Stark Vegas.
That's true. And these are two terrible teams. I mean, Mississippi State played Eastern Kentucky, then lost to Arizona State, and then got blown out by Toledo at home. Oh,
Lord. I didn't see that. So now I'm starting to feel bad about this pick.
Give me Florida and give me Florida to cover.
I didn't see the Toledo game. I left off on Arizona State, so I think that might not be good either. I might have to go edit that pick out, but you know what? I'm going to stay with the Fighting Cowbells because I think Florida's just, man. This is terrible, man. This is going to be that's a terrible game. So we'll see, man. I think really though, I think for Florida, like if you lose this game, I think they
Oof.
leave Dan Mullen in Starkville. I think they do.
Billy
Not Dan
Napier.
Mullen, Billy Napier. Man,
They
I'm
already
all over the
left.
place
They
with
already
Florida.
left Dan Mullen.
Exactly. I'm all over the place. So we'll see, man. That would be a really embarrassing loss. But the fact that they get blown out by Toledo and then you're
Yeah.
only a 6-point favorite,
Yep.
youch.
Yep.
Yeah, maybe I should have picked Florida on that one. My gut says to go with Florida, but again, with Eugene Wilson out already with a bad offense, yeesh, I don't know, man.
Yeah.
Now, if they play Lagway, I think you might have a chance there.
Oof.
The next one here, Georgia Tech at number 19, Louisville. Louisville gets 10.5 at home. This is a interesting game because we saw Georgia Tech come out. Of course, they beat Florida State, got kind of hyped up there. We realized Florida State was not the team that they should have been getting credit for beating. They go on the road. They handle business against Georgia State and kind of a slower game there. Then they get mollywopped by Syracuse up
Oof.
there in the dome. Louisville looks like a pretty good team, man. Number 19, top 20 in the country. They've done pretty well, but they haven't really played anybody good yet. So this is kind of going to be one of their first tests of the season. I don't know, man. I'm not really a huge believer in Georgia Tech right now. I kind of think they got some, a little icing on the cake from beating a bad Florida State team.
Yeah.
I'm going to take Louisville to win. I'm a little nervous about giving them 10.5 points because they have not faced a decent opponent yet. So I think this will be a big test for Louisville. So I will take Louisville at home by 10.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Louisville to win the game, but I'm going to take Georgia Tech to cover. I just feel like that 10.5 is just a lot for two teams that I don't think Georgia Tech, they got a lot of credit for beating a really bad Florida State team, but they're not as bad as what they because they were in that game with Syracuse as well too. So I think Louisville is the better team. I think Louisville wins, but I'm going to take Georgia Tech to cover that 10.5.
Yeah, if it was 9.5, I would probably take them to cover. 10 still a big number, but being that it's in Louisville, which is not a hugely, I don't even think they call it Papa John's anymore. But
nope.
Yeah, but I'm going to take Louisville in that one, and really I'm just kind of waiting for that Louisville Miami matchup. That's kind of what I'm waiting for with them now. USC number 11. Somebody did figure out how to play a little bit of defense.
Yes, they did.
And it's not LSU, but USC goes to the Big House against number 18 Michigan. Look, the last time Michigan welcomed in a ranked team to the Big House, it did not go well. They got blown out by Texas. But as we talked about, USC is not Texas. They are not quite on that level yet. USC is getting 4.5 points in this one.
Yeah.
Man, I still am not a believer in Michigan. I just think they have really kind of fallen apart since all these things that have happened here. I'm going to take USC to win. I think it might be closer than the Texas game, but I have USC winning. It's really hard to say whether they're going to cover on this one. I could see it being a 3-point. I could see it being a 3-point game. I mean, Michigan did get a decent win. They did cover last week against Arkansas State, but again, it's Arkansas State. USC did beat that LSU team to give them a little bit of a good look, but how good is LSU? So give me USC in a close one. I'll take the Trojans to win, Michigan to cover, and I don't feel very confident about that. I'm not buying Michigan at all this year.
It's wild. I mean, these are two of the most all-time winningest programs in college football history. Michigan, I think, is number 1. I think USC is in top 5 somewhere. This is a great, Jesse. This is a great Jersey game, right?
Oh,
this is the history of college football right here. They've only played 10 times. 10 times. And the last time they played was in 2007 when Pete Carroll was the head coach at USC and Lloyd Carr was the head coach at Michigan.
Wow.
USC has won the last 3 times they've played, okay? Michigan's offense is it's in the witness protection program with Florida State. So give me USC, fight on, baby, to win and by a touchdown. So they end up covering.
I like it. Next up is Utah, number 12, at number 14, Oklahoma State. This game we got to put an asterisk by because this is an interesting one here. Utah is getting 2 points in this one, a 2-point favorite over Oklahoma State at Oklahoma State in Stillwater. But the question is Cam Rising going to play? Because originally it sounded like he was out for the season, but you were telling me before the show that there's a possibility he might play in this one. It's hard for me to pick a cover when I don't know who the quarterback's going to be because this is a massive difference between their QB1 and whoever their QB2 is. I got Utah winning this game if Cam Rising plays. I think they win
Mm.
and they cover. Man, Oklahoma State. I know they got Ollie Gordon. I know Mullet Mike Gundy is he's done some things out there. Um, the problem is, man, Oklahoma State is so inconsistent. Like they
Yeah.
win some good games, and then they lose some just head scratcher games. If Cam Rising plays, I'm taking Utah to cover. If Cam Rising does not play, then I'm going to go with, because we talked about last week with them against Utah State, and I was like, man, I just don't know without that quarterback, and they ended up playing a little bit tight, I think it was, and so I'm going to go, if Cam Rising doesn't play, I'm going to go with Oklahoma State to get the win here.
All right. So this is breaking news off the hot press. Cam Rising is expected to start this game against Oklahoma State. So I
Give me
the only
Utah to cover then.
give it Utah to cover. Okay.
Yeah.
My only thing with this one is you're right. Mullet Gundy and Oklahoma State, they're just so flaky. You just never know what you're going to get with them. They were down. I forget what game they were. They were struggling really bad, and they came back to win that game earlier this season.
Arkansas.
Arkansas, that's what it was. Yeah, against Arkansas, Utah. The thing I worry about with Utah is that he has not played at all this season. He literally got hurt like first game of the season. He's not out. Now he is like a 20th year senior, whatever he is there. Right now, this is an asterisk game, right? You said this is an asterisk game? Okay, great. Okay. I'm going to go right now with Oklahoma State, and I'm going to go with them to cover because I don't know how you don't cover 2.5.
Yeah.
But I'm not confident about this game at all.
Yeah. Man, the thing with Oklahoma State is, like, you look at how they struggled at home against Arkansas. Arkansas is just a terrible team. They barely beat UAB last week. So again, Oklahoma State has been consistently decent, but they're just inconsistent. So give me Utah if Cam Rising plays. If he doesn't, I think they can knock him off there.
Yep.
Next up, one that we'll be keeping our eye on is number 8 Miami at South Florida. Miami's getting 17 in this one. That's a pretty big number. The question that we had in this one, we were talking about before the show, Miami has looked very good, right? But they don't have, like, I think, it sounds terrible to say.
I got you, bro.
I really look at it this way, like, man, I think if you put Miami and Alabama, because that's kind of a common opponent here with USF. Now, we haven't seen what happens with Miami yet, but if you put Miami and Alabama toe to toe in a neutral site, man, I would go with Miami right now. I think they would probably beat Alabama just because of the way they look. But I still think, because of a long history of recruiting, I think really that comes down to your quarterback. I just think Cam Ward is much better than Jalen Milroe. But I think Alabama has more depth than Miami right now, more competitive quality depth. And so that's what ended up winning them that game against South Florida. Like, first off, if South Florida had any little bit of offense besides basically a triple option quarterback who just runs the ball, like, he cannot throw the ball worth a flip. If they could throw the ball and have any bit of offense, they probably would have beat Alabama in that game. But because they couldn't, because they ran out of depth late in the game, they ended up running away with that. Alabama did. But that was a one-score game in the fourth quarter. So I think it's like, can USF do enough against Miami before they run out of gas? Now, it is in Tampa. That one was in Tuscaloosa. So I think there is the advantage there. I think USF is going to feel confident going into this one because of what they did against Alabama. But I do think Miami is going to be looking to prove a point here. So I'm going to take Miami to win, and I think I'm going to take Miami to cover. But I think it's a late cover, just like Alabama. I think this one could be a little bit closer early on. But then I think later in the game, I think the talent and the depth pull away, and give me Miami by about 20.
Yeah. Listen, Miami's got so far, yes, they've been getting fat on cupcakes right now, but they look good in those cupcake games. Cam Ward has looked great. That offense has looked electric and explosive. The defense is nasty. They're getting downhill. They trigger when they're supposed to. So Miami looks great. Give me Miami. But check this out, dude. Check this out really quick. In 2013, Miami played University of South Florida. Guess who was the head coach at that time?
Was that Willie T?
Willie T. Good old Willie Taggart. Okay. Miami beat them 49-21. Then Miami beat them again in 2012, 40-9. The only time they've played 6 times, the only time USF has beaten Florida or Miami, I'm sorry, it was in 2010. Guess who was the Miami head coach at that time?
Was that old Randy Shannon.
Also, Raggedy
Raggedy Randy.
Shannon, Raggedy Randy. Like, what's going on here, bro?
This is crazy.
So yes, give me Miami to cover. I think they cover. I think this game is over by halftime.
Hey, we'll see, man. I hope USF puts up a fight. Listen to
It'd
me.
be nice.
If you're watching this, USF,
Come on now.
let's go. Come on, get it together. Just give them a scare. I don't expect you to win, but just give them a scare.
That's right.
So the last pick we're going to do here before we get into Florida State Cal is number 6 Tennessee at number 15 OU. Man, this is the most insane number that I have ever seen. Like, I get maybe it's at OU. They have a okay defense. Their offense is not that great. I might have to take out a second mortgage this week to bet on this game. Tennessee gets 7 points. That is slim, man.
It's ridiculous.
I think this is, first off, this will be the biggest test for Tennessee so far this season, just from an athlete matchup. From that kind of standpoint, I think OU has a point to prove. But, man, I don't see this one being even close. I think Tennessee is going to win. I think Tennessee is going to cover. I think Tennessee is going to cover that in the first quarter.
Yep.
So give me the Vols to roll OU and keep that thing rolling there in Knoxville.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with this. Last week they were my triple lock it down, take it to the bank lock of the week, and they proved me right within the first quarter when they started kicking onside kicks at up 30 points. Listen, they went on the road to NC State. Now
it was neutral. It was neutral.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's right. I keep forgetting it was neutral. They went into Charlotte, which is basically not a neutral game.
Right.
And it was more NC State, and they blew NC State out 51-10. I mean, just completely wiped them off the scale. That was their toughest test to this point. We know Oklahoma struggled against, I think it was Tulsa,
Houston.
I believe. Houston. Thank you.
Yep.
It was like 16-15, I think was the final score, something of that nature. Give me Tennessee. Give me to cover in the first half.
Yeah, I think that's just going to be a blowout. And so getting to the game of the week, and it's our game of the week anyway, and that is Florida State versus Cal. And again, guys, like I said, on these game day shows, look, we didn't have a standalone Cal preview, so we're going to spend a little bit of extra time on this one. We tried to get this show kind of knocked out a little bit sooner so we could get you a good Cal preview. But again, man, there's only so much you can talk about with this team. It's kind of the same story week over week. Like, are they going to show up and all this stuff? But we're going to spend a few minutes talking about this one because obviously this is our game. This is the one we want to spend some time talking about. So we want to dig into this one for you guys. Now, before I get into that, it is family weekend in Tallahassee. So if you are going to be in town for the game, it is a night game inside Doak Campbell Stadium. Make sure you stop by and get gear for the entire family because it's family weekend. And you can do that at Alumni Hall FSU, 1415 Timber Lane Road in Tallahassee. It is very convenient on your drive into town on the way to Doak Campbell Stadium. They got something for the Little Seminole fans, to every single one you got. You got tailgate supplies, you got clothes, you got everything that you want there. They have a massive selection of things there. So stop by and check them out at 1415 Timber Lane Road. If you want to know what they got ahead of time or you want to shop online, pick up in store, you can do that at alumnihall.com. Navigate over to the FSU page and don't forget to use code SPEAR to get 10% off so you can save yourself some money because you might need a few extra drinks in that when you get to the stadium.
That's right.
So save you some drinking money on your gear and use code SPEAR for that one to get 10% off. So we appreciate you guys supporting those who support us. And Alumni Hall has been rocking with us for quite a while now. So we appreciate those guys a whole lot. So let's get into this FSU Cal game, Michael. Now, this is, to me, man, it's a game of first. First ever matchup, first ever ACC game for Cal, and it'll be the first win or the first loss for either one of these teams. Cal comes into this one 3-0. Florida State comes in 0-3. Man, speaking of drinking, I think Vegas has been tipping the bottle back because they still have Florida State as a 2.5-point favorite.
They are making money on Florida State.
I do not. They must be betting. They set the spread and then bet against us. Exactly. I know what y'all are cooking the books. I see what you're doing. That seems crazy, man. It really does. Over under this one is 44.5. So again, probably not expecting much of an offensive showing out of Florida State once again here. I did look some numbers up here. The spread, the bets are heavily on Cal to cover the spread, but for some reason, man,
are they kidding me?
The straight up winner,
the money line really is Florida State.
The money is Florida State, and so I'm not sure. I hate to say it. Look, I gave Florida State the benefit of the doubt too many daggone times. I don't know that I can do that again this week,
No.
but yeah, I'm looking right here at the numbers. Against the spread, 72% of bets and 75% of the money have Cal covering. The money line, 89% of bets are on Florida State. 99% of the money is on Florida State. So they must know something that we don't know. I
Jeez.
don't know, man. It doesn't make any sense to me. Now, some of the projections that I've seen here so far actually are kind of closer, but in line with that. The one app that I use for some game information here has Florida State at 57% win probability. ESPN Predictor has Florida State at 58%, and PFF has Florida State at 55%. So all garnet and gold here, which again seems kind of weird. Now, on some implied scores, which are pretty much computer models here, you do finally have your split. Now, you have one that says 24-21 FSU, one that says 27-23 Cal. That maybe sounds a little bit more like it makes some sense here. And surprisingly enough, man, when you look at the PFF team grades here, because I'm kind of going more big picture than digging into the deep stats, because look, man, I've done this every week where we had all these stats and they didn't mean squat. So we're
They
going
didn't mean diddly.
we're going to stop with all that. But I'm surprised, man. Team grades here overall, Cal is at 87.2, Florida State's at 71.1. Look, man, I don't know. They must be great on. They must be great on a curve. They're great on a curve because that ain't it. But I will say it's going to be interesting in this one, man, because Cal has a 56.9 tackle grade and we have 55.4. So there's going to probably be some sloppy tackling in this game. Now let's look at Cal, their 3-0 record and how they got here, because this is. I think, Michael, when you go big picture on this, like, it is interesting, right? Florida State has lost 3 games, right? But they also played Georgia Tech, who is not great, but they're not bad. They lost to Boston College. Boston College is not great, but they just hung with the number 6 team in the country on the road. They're not bad. They lost to Memphis. Memphis is not great, but they are a legitimate G5 contender.
They're one of the best G5s, yes.
Right. So then you turn and you look at Cal, right? Game 1, they start off the season against UC Davis, an FCS team, 2-1. They win that game 31-13. Now, here's the thing. They've gotten off to some slow starts this season at Cal. They only led that game 14-13 at halftime. Cal only ran 21 plays in the first half to UC Davis's 52. Now, Cal did pull away in the second half. In the third quarter alone, they had an 80-yard kickoff return for a touchdown and 3 interceptions. So they really turned it on and pulled away from that one. But UC Davis outgained them 304 to 281. Cal only averaged 2.7 yards per carry on the ground. We know Jaden Ott, their star running back, is injured. He is questionable for this Saturday. If he comes back, that's going to be a problem. But he has not been available. He did not play in the San Diego State game. So, man, I mean, they're starting off pretty close against that FCS UC Davis. I mean, that was a close one. And then, we'll talk about that Auburn game in just a second. But the other one here was we'll talk about Auburn last because that's the most comparable opponent here. But 31-10 over San Diego State. Now, San Diego State is struggling this year. Poor old A.J. Duffy couldn't even get the starting job out there. They're 1-2 with their only win being against an FCS team. Cal did outgain them 473 yards to 276, blew them out 31-10. But another slow start by Cal. That game was only 7-3 at halftime. So again, man, they are a really slow starting team. Now, that I think is going to be key for Florida State. We don't ever start slow, fast, or anything. We don't do nothing. We don't ever start. So, like, if you can start fast, I think you can give yourself some confidence. You can jump out on them. Here's the problem. Cal rushed for 275 yards, 6.5 yards per carry in that game. We know Florida State's rushing defense has been atrocious. They were better against Memphis last week. Cal defense got 2 interceptions in that game. But, man, Cal, like in this one, I know the score says 31-10. They gave up 6 sacks, had 12 penalties, a missed field goal, and 3 failed 4th down attempts. So Cal looks good, right? 3-0. Right. They have not been flawless. And so before we get deeper into Cal and into that Auburn game, man, just looking at those other 2 games, man, again, like, they got some warts too. Now, Absolutely. They found ways to win where Florida State has found ways to lose. Right. That's the difference between 3-0 and 0-3, but it ain't all been pretty.
No, absolutely. And that's the thing. I think when you look at these 2 teams going into the season, you would have automatically assumed that this was a straight up dub beyond dubs. This was one of your locks of locks, right? Going into the season. And when you look at what Cal has produced, you would say if Florida State was just even remotely better, you might be a little nervous about the game, but you wouldn't be as nervous. Right. I mean, I'm not nervous because I already know what's going to happen, but I'm just saying you you wouldn't be as nervous about this game. Cal has not shown for them to be a juggernaut. Man, they have shown their consistency of play. One of the things I do love about their team is that, man, you look at their defense, man, they got linebackers that are not all world linebackers, but those linebackers trigger. Man, they're downhill. They will hit you as hard as they possibly can. They're usually in the right spots at the right time. Their run fits are really good. Their defensive line plays with energy and effort and passion. Their corners, they're not the greatest, but you know what? They're going to try to make a play. Yeah. Their offense, they run the ball really well. You talked about this in the preseason when people were making fun of us. We're saying, wow, why is every game so tough? This is why every game is so tough, right?
Yeah.
Because they got a consistent running back. You know they're going to try to run the ball. You know they're going to try to hit you over the top of some play action stuff behind your secondary. And so this is who Cal is going up against this Florida State team. I mean,
yeah, it's not super flashy, but they get the job done. And, that, like, people kind of laughed at me earlier in the season when I said, like, look, man, this Cal game is going to be tougher than people think. It was really all about the defense because their offense was pretty good last year, averaged over 30 points a game. Now, they played in the Pac-12, who didn't have great defenses. The defense was the question coming into this. They were 114th in scoring defense last year. And, man, really, like, this is the reason why I do bring up that they have not played anybody yet. Now, the unfortunate part is we suck too, so that's the problem. Because when you look at last year, they played, I think it was 4 top 25 offenses last year. Now, the Pac-12 had some deadly offenses. They gave up 57 points a game to those top 25 offenses last year. Gosh. So they were getting gashed. And they just haven't played that yet this year. So the bad news for us is we won't know because we have a bottom 25 offense. We have a bottom 2 to 5 offense. But the one that I was really had my eye on, right? This is the one where I was like, I don't care about what you do against UC Davis. San Diego State doesn't really mean a whole lot to me. How are you going to play in that Auburn game? Because you have to travel 2,400 miles east. You have to go to a stadium with 88,000 people. And here's the thing, man. I was watching that game because they had Auburn beat last year. They just missed 3 field goals, and they ended up losing that game real close by 1 score. Now, Auburn's not good. Like, Auburn ended up benching Peyton Thorne after this because he had a terrible game. They're still very inconsistent. This is the same team that got blown out last year by New Mexico State. So they're not good. But Cal is, because of that win, they are not going to be intimidated by Florida State. They're not going to be intimidated by Doak Campbell Stadium because, again, they go to Auburn with 88,000 fans into SEC country, and you're probably going to be sitting around 50,000. So they're not going to be intimidated by the team or the environment. I think you're hoping this one is that they're overconfident and they come in here and they slack off a little bit and you sneak up on them. But they do go into Auburn as an 11.5 point underdog and beat Auburn 21-14. Now, Auburn played absolutely terrible. They also got some help from the refs late in that game from some BS targeting, a couple of things that really the game should have been 21-7. That's what, because I actually watched the end of that game. That was when Notre Dame was getting upset, but I was watching this on the split screen on YouTube TV because I wanted to see how this one turned out. They did outgain Auburn 332 to 286. And here's the thing, though, man. Like, even when we talk about this game, hat tip to them. You went into Auburn, into SEC country, and you beat them as an 11.5 point underdog, but you won the turnover battle 5-0. 5-0, and you still only won by 7 points.
That's right.
Typically, that's a 20-30 point blowout. So that's kind of has me kind of a little bit of watching here. Like you probably should have done a little bit better than that. Now, one thing I will say about Cal is they are heavily penalized. They did have 11 penalties in that one. They are 124th in the country in penalties with almost 9.3 per game. So you're hoping that they can make some mistakes. This is like the one stat area where Florida State holds the lead, and that is in penalties. But, man, I mean, I think really when you just look at that, and again, like, they did this without Jay Knott because he only had 10 attempts for 11 yards because he's been injured. Going into Jordan Hare and beating Auburn was a big statement game for them. And that's why I think, like, they're not going to be scared to make this trip back to Tallahassee.
Absolutely. And I think too, part of this is like, I mean, if you go back and look at that game, I mean, they threw the ball, or they ran the ball 34 times for 2.9 yards per carry. I mean, Auburn basically, it looked like, stacked the box and said, we dare you to just try to beat us with your arm. Quarterback threw for 36 passes for 233 yards. They were 10 of 19 on third down, which is one of the bugaboos about Florida State's defense, is that we're just giving
Yeah,
up
oh
third downs
gosh.
willy-nilly. And so, they were able to convert 10 of 19, which meant that though Auburn was getting them off the field, Auburn just couldn't keep the ball. I mean, they
Right.
threw 4 interceptions and had a fumble. Like they
Yeah.
just couldn't keep the ball. You
Yeah.
imagine if they don't have those turnovers, we're probably talking about a different thing. Auburn
Right.
probably wins
Yep.
the game. And so the whole point is what I'm saying is that, Cal is not a good team. They're not a
Mm-mm.
terrible team. They're just kind of that gritty team that hangs around and allows you to make enough mistakes that they will try to capitalize on it. And that's where Florida State's going to have to be incredibly careful. I mean, last week we had 3 turnovers, I believe, if I remember correctly, and one, the second play from scrimmage.
I know. Gosh.
Like, if we turn the ball over, we're going to, it's a guaranteed lose, because Cal is not going to make a lot of mistakes themselves. They're going to bait you
Yep.
into those. They're just going to do what they got to do, and they're going to wait till you do that and then take advantage of that.
Yeah. And so let's talk real quick about the offense here. First up is quarterback Fernando Mendoza. Now, he came in last year. Cal shuffled through a couple of guys last year. Fernando ended up starting the last 8 games of the season, won the starting job this year. Interesting fact, if you guys have not heard me talk about this before, I actually got to interview him at ACC Media Days. And look, I know they're the opponent this week. We don't like Cal. We don't like anybody on Cal. Man, I just got to say, like, props to this kid. He is one of the most well-spoken, respected respectable young men that I've ever interviewed. Very, very respectful. And he's had a pretty good season. Now, he's not a gunslinger.
Right.
29 attempts per game, around 196 yards, 61 of 87, 70.1 completion percentage. So very efficient guy. Not a gunslinger, but he's very efficient. 589 yards, 6.8 yards per attempt. But if you haven't heard me talk about this before, he's actually from South Florida. He
Okay.
actually grew up. Maybe we don't like him for this. He actually grew up a Miami fan.
Oh, gosh.
But he told me that, like, Miami had only given him a walk-on offer, and so Cal gave him a full ride. So that's how he ended up at Cal. So they play Miami and Florida State this year. So interesting nugget there for you guys. But when we talked about it, he did say, man, that like he is familiar. Like, he knows Florida State. He's seen games in Doak Campbell Stadium. He knows how special it is to play here, and he is very excited about getting to play here. I'm sure as a Miami fan growing up, this is going to be an important game for him.
Did somebody tell him it's not the same Doak Campbell?
It's not. And the thing is, Miami has to go to Cal. So I'm
Yeah.
sure he's going to have family probably in Tallahassee for this game. So he's going to want to do well. And the reason I say he's very respectful is, like, he said that, like, man, he already has people who are wanting him to do the U down, who are wanting him to snap the spear. And he's like, I'm not going to do that, man. I'm not going to disrespect those programs. But yeah, South Florida kid. So he's going to be really looking forward to this one. And so, again, you look at his numbers. He's very efficient. 5 touchdowns, only 1 interception on the year. He's 34th in QBR at 71.1%. DJ is 88th in QBR at 43.1. But when you look at this Cal offense, right? So they live in that 0 to 19 yard range. 71.3% of their passes are between that 0 and 19 range, which is, obviously common. They don't take a lot of deep shots. Only 9.2% of passes go for over 20 yards. They're only 3 of 8 on the season, 37.5% completion percentage. But when you look at the short passes, 0 to 9 yards, that's their favorite go-to right there. 46% of their passes are from 0 to 9 yards, and he has an 85% completion percentage on those. So they distribute the ball. They don't ask him to do too much. They let him get the ball to his playmakers in space and let them do it. Now, on these 10 to 19 yards, that's about 25% of their passes, which is 63.6% completion percentage. So, man, expect a lot of those short passes to get the ball in space. Not a whole lot of screens here, only 11.7%. But like you mentioned, a very play action heavy team. 42.7% of passes have been play action this year. But here's the one thing that I want to talk about. This is the one place where I think Florida State has an opportunity to win this game. This is the one thing that I've really got my eyes on here. He has not faced a lot of pressure. They have an experienced offensive line. He's only been pressured on 27.2% of his dropbacks, but that has a lot to do with that UC Davis game. They only gave up 3 pressures in the entire game. But then you look at the game against Auburn. They turn around, a defensive line that's going to be similar to yours. 16 pressures, 2 sacks. The last game against San Diego State, who's not a good team, 9 pressures, 6 sacks. So 8 sacks in the last 2 games, 25 pressures. And here's the other thing. So Florida State actually, when they didn't face a mobile quarterback, who he's not a mobile quarterback, against Memphis, against Seth Hennigan, they had 16 pressures and 3 sacks. It's by far the best pressure game they've had all season. So we saw the ability for them to do the same thing. Well, here with Mendoza, his pressure to sack ratio is the 4th highest in the Power 4 at 32.1%. So if Florida State can create havoc in the backfield, you can really disrupt this passing game, and you can hopefully rattle him and have him make some mistakes. Now, that cannot come at the expense of you giving up 200 rush yards. That is the key. But we know they did well against Memphis last week. They held them to -1 rushing yards in the first half, under 100 yards in the entire game. But Cal is a much better rushing team than Memphis. So you're probably not going to do that again this week, but you have an opportunity to create havoc in the backfield. So that, to me, is one of the biggest keys that Florida State can win this game. You got to have your pass rushers show up big in this game because you have a real opportunity to create pressure and get him on the ground.
Yeah. Yes. If Florida State, if what we saw from the Memphis game, where that defensive line actually started to play with energy, effort, and passion, and actually get into the backfield and reset that offensive line, like they are resetting the line of scrimmage and not having it be reset on them, then I think you can, because when you go back and watch those games, especially against San Diego and against Auburn, you saw a lot of penetration. You saw that quarterback was on the move. He did not feel comfortable in the pocket, couldn't set his feet to make those little short 0 to 8 and 8 to 19-yard throws. And so it's going to be imperative upon Adam Fuller to put his defense in position. This is a game that I would say, and Adam Fuller doesn't like to blitz a lot, I might bring a lot more pressure in this game.
I would. I definitely would.
I would try to bring more pressure. I'd put our secondary on some islands a couple times. I'd go cover one, bring a safety to the middle of the field, bring one safety down and say, look, we're going to force you to beat us with your arm. We are not letting you get more than 50 yards rushing this whole game. You're going to have to make some throws. Your wide receivers are going to have to win some one-on-ones. And if Florida State does that, I have a sneaking suspicion that Cal won't answer the bell because they don't have the kind of skill set to go up against our corners. And that is going to put even more pressure on the quarterback and on that run game to try to make something happen.
Oh, for sure. Now let's talk about the pass catchers, because obviously they're going to try and get the ball out quick. So while we talk about disrupting them in the backfield, they're going to try to get it out of his hands. So, Michael, this just makes me sad, right? So their leading receiver right now, 6'2", 200-pound redshirt freshman. Imagine that. Somebody's willing to play a young guy. Look at that. Who
Look at that.
I didn't know it was possible. It's illegal in Tallahassee, apparently. But 6'2", 210-pound redshirt freshman, Isaiah, I think I'm saying that right, Hunter. He has 12 receptions for 143 yards and 4 touchdowns, leads the team. He's actually the only true wide receiver. Their tight end, Corey Deitch, is a senior. He has a touchdown too. He's actually the only receiver to record a touchdown for them this season with 4. So he's kind of really their go-to guy. Now, junior Jonathan Brady has also been the number 2 target for them, 7 receptions, 95 yards. It's really not the most dynamic group, but the one thing that stands out the most to me here, this is a very, again, we talk about efficient, not explosive. They're efficient, a very sure-handed receiving group. They're, as a team, their reception rate is 72.7% with only a 4.7% drop pass percentage. Now, for reference, Florida State as a team has a 61.1% catch rate and the highest in the entire Power 4 drop rate at 14.1%. So, again, they are very efficient, but not the most dynamic group here.
Right.
So, I mean, you're going to have to cover them because they're going to get the ball in space and you're going to have to tackle well. Now, on the ground here, again, like we talked about, Jay Nott is out. He is questionable for this one. He did not play at all in San Diego State.
Right.
I've heard some rumors that he is going to be back for this game. I don't know that he's going to be at 100%. Honestly, I think if Florida State was 3-0, he does probably try to go. Being that they're 0-3, I think you kind of like maybe he's a healthy scratch. You keep him on the
Yep.
sideline. Like, look, if we need you, we'll go to you. Because, man, they got some good guys here, too. I mean, you look at redshirt sophomore Javion Thomas, 31 attempts, 241 yards, 7.8 yards per carry and a
Yeesh.
touchdown. That is really good. I mean, now keep in mind, Jade Knott was a guy who put up over 1,400 all-purpose yards last year while missing time in 3 games. So if he comes back, he's their most dynamic guy. But, I mean, you already got a guy averaging 7.8 yards per carry. And then senior Kadarius Callaway behind him, 18 attempts, 102 yards. Also with a nice yards per carry average here at 5.7 with 1 touchdown. So, man, it's going to be, again, like, this is not a dynamic, explosive offense, but like you said, they run the ball well. They don't make a lot of mistakes. They get the ball into the hands of the receivers, and they're very efficient.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this run game, this is what they pride themselves on. This is what their bread and butter is. This is what they want to do. They want to get those hands into those backs, and they want to be able to run the ball on you, right? To make you have to play possession football. I mean, I imagine, Jesse, you're going to probably see a lot of what Georgia Tech tried to do: run the ball, run that clock, keep the possessions low, right, and see if Florida State will make mistakes. This is where I'm saying, Adam Fuller, I think you bring 7 or 8 in that box.
Yep.
And you make them beat you because this is their strength. And if you can force them to try to throw it over you, I think this gives you the advantage. But if you let them run because you're afraid and you want to keep 2 high safeties, and you let them run because we can't run fit it very well, right? Because we've been terrible at the run fit. If you let them now, I will say we did improve a little bit against the run against Memphis, so I'll give them that.
Yep.
But if you just play 2 high safeties and just try to let them do that, you're setting yourself up to lose. You have to challenge their quarterback, make their quarterback win the game with his arms.
Yeah. And so, I mean, really the thing that's concerning here too is you look at the scoring offense, only 27.7 points per game, 80th. So it's not a really high flying offense. But Florida State's defense has been bad. You're giving up 24 points per game, 83rd in the country. So you expect they're probably going to hit that 20 to 24 range.
Yep.
But let's talk about their defense real quick. Now, we already mentioned last year it was terrible. 114th in the country, gave up 57.3 points per game against the 4 top 25 offenses they faced. This year, it's much better.
Yeah.
They just haven't faced any really good offenses yet. 12.3 points per game, 28th in the country. Again, the problem is Florida State's scoring offense is 124th in the country at 15.3 points per game. Doo-doo. I mean, it's just terrible.
Doo-doo.
But like you said, man, I mean, you already touched on this defense here. And again, I will say, like, when you look at the game that San Diego State played, they only played one other Power 5 team, Oregon State, and they got shut out. So again, that's not a very good team there. But again, very experienced secondary. They have really good linebackers, solid, right? Not great, but solid. They're a solid team. They just don't make a lot of mistakes. They are first in the country in interceptions with 9. That is what worries you in this game. They lead the country in interceptions. And that has propelled them to actually be tied for second in turnover margin at +8. Florida State is at -3. So again, it is going to be of the utmost importance for you to maybe not win the turnover battle, but you can't have 5-0 against Auburn because you like Auburn did, because if you do that, you're going to get blown out with this offense.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, you saw what happened against Memphis. I mean, we had 2 fumbles, and we had a muff punt, we had a fumble in the second play of scrimmage, and we had a absolutely asinine interception thrown. I mean, he did get his arm hit, so I should give him that in that sense. And we turned the ball over, and it took those possessions away in which we had some momentum going each time. And so Florida State has to be extra cautious and concerned about turning this ball over against Cal, because they're going to try to run the ball. They're going to try to limit the possessions you have. So if this is a low possession game, every possession is going to matter. And you turning it over is only creating more opportunities for them to run that clock, get a score, and then try to beat you by just bludgeoning you with that run game.
And gassing your defense.
Exactly.
I mean, it's going to be tough. Now, Michael, the most interesting stat of this week, all around, and it actually has nothing to do with this week.
Okay.
Last year, this was by far the best game DJU had as a quarterback at Oregon State.
That's right.
He absolutely shredded Cal, 19 of 25, 270 yards, and 5 touchdowns. My man ain't thrown 5 touchdowns in 3 games this year. So, like, Could this be the DJU redemption game?
Oh, man.
I hope so. I don't know. Is he even going to start this game? I don't know. Maybe Mike Norvell sees that 5 touchdown game. He's like, well, look, we're at least going to roll with you one more time. So with that being said, let's get into keys and predictions here. But before we do that, there's one thing that I want to say, Michael. So look, right, I was looking over some things while I was writing our preview last night that you can check out on plantandspirit.com, our written preview. You can ignore everything we just said, right? There are 3 numbers, 3 stats that define this game for me, why I have a hard time picking Florida State. First off, the simple and most obvious stat, and that's 3-0 versus 0-3.
Yep.
One team has found ways to win. We talked about the slow starts that they had against the 2 bad teams. We talked about the close game they had, even though they won 5-0 in the turnover margin battle against Auburn, but they still found ways to win. Florida State had a chance to win last week. You freaking muffed the punt by getting blocked into your guy. You have a penalty there on the other punt. So, like, Florida State has consistently found ways to lose. That is the first thing there. You have one team that learns how to win, one team that still doesn't know how to win this game yet. The second thing is the turnover margin, which we just talked about. Cal is +8. Florida State is -3. We can't recover fumbles to save our life. We are good for at least about a pick a game. Cal is I think they actually lead the country in the most turnovers created at 10. So again, if you lose the turnover battle in this one by more than 1, you're probably going to get blown out. This is the most alarming stat to me when I got to looking over some numbers. And it's not so much the percentages here, but the raw numbers, right? And that's red zone scoring. So when you look at Cal has had 12 trips into the red zone. That's the important number to remember. 12 trips into the red zone. They've scored on 10, 83%, 9 touchdowns, only 1 field goal. So they're getting touchdowns every time they get in the red zone, just about. Florida State has given up 12 trips to the red zone, and they've allowed scores on 11 of them. 9 touchdowns, 2 field goals. So we're giving up touchdowns. Now, keep in mind that 12-12 number, right? So Cal's getting into the red zone a lot. That means they're driving down the field, getting into scoring position. Florida State, 12, is allowing teams to drive down the field, get into scoring position. Here's the other alarming part of that. Florida State only has 5 trips in the red zone. Now, they've scored on 100%, only 2 touchdowns, 3 field goals, so they're kicking more often than they're scoring. Cal has only allowed 5 trips into the red zone, 4 or 5 scores, 3 touchdowns, 1 field goal. So they're giving up some touchdowns there. But again, they are getting into the red zone 12 times so far. You're giving up 12. You're only getting into the red zone 5 times. They're only giving up 5. That number is so lopsided.
Absolutely.
It makes me not want to pick Florida State in this one. And that's tough. So as we get into keys and predictions, man, I really think if you took away anything from this whole thing, man, those 3 numbers scare me the most.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can go ahead and give you my keys here because they correlate with basically what you're talking about. Number 1 key to this game for me, you've got to start Brock or do something exotic. You cannot. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. You cannot roll D. I don't care that if he threw 50 touchdowns against Cal. This ain't Oregon State DJU. This ain't even Clemson DJU. This is the Florida State, and I hate having to put that beautiful name in front of him, that this is the Florida State version of DJU. And
behind Florida State's offensive line.
Florida State's offensive line. This offense is in witness protection. It needs something. Case in point, Florida State has scored in 3 games, only 4 total touchdowns. In 3 games, Jesse, they've only scored 4 touchdowns. Okay. They're averaging 15 points a game. And that's not even really indicative of what it actually looks like. They scored 21 against Georgia Tech, 13 against Boston College, 12 against Memphis. We're going the wrong way. You've got to do something different. 3 games is 3 games evident enough, Mike Norvell. That's my number 1 key. You got to start Brock or you got to go Wildcat. You got to do something to move this offense so that they're not a stationary, stuck in the mud quarterback in the background, to try to do something to jumpstart this offense. And then I would say number 2 is, again, like I've been saying, defense. Adam Fuller, you've got to get pressure on the quarterback. You've got to make him use his arm. You got to make him beat you with his arm. You got to, I'm telling you, roll a safety down, put more in the box. stop that run game and force him to have to beat you with his arm. And then last thing is you can't turn the ball over. Like you said, if you turn the ball over more than one time, you're probably looking at getting your butt whooped.
Yeah. Yeah. And really, we share a lot of the same keys. Now, I will say, I still think, man, as much as I disagree with it, I still think DJ is going to start. And again,
I know.
go watch that offensive line episode. Remember, we've allowed the second most pressures in all of college foot or all in Power Four. We've dropped the most passes in all of Power Four.
Yep.
It's not all DJ.
It's
So
not all DJ.
Even if you bring Brock in, he's probably going to be running for his life and throwing to receivers that can't catch. But he can run for his life. DJ can't. He just has to kind of stand there and take it. And I don't know if it's, he wears the brace, he has the leg sleeve on. I don't know if it's injury related or not, but it's not working. That's what it's not doing. You hope that Mike Norvell has the gall to actually make the change. Again, there's no reason for him to tip his hand to let them know that Brock Glenn is going to start. So I understand the depth chart thing. I get that. But at the same time, I think you at least have to see Brock in this one, right? I think at least you have to give him an opportunity. If DJ struggles, I think you need to have a couple packages. We've heard practice reports this week that Brock has been able to make plays with his legs. So I think that is going to be a crucial part of this game. Personally, I'm with you. I think you should start Brock. I think there's also a couple of big factors to this. Is Darius Washington going to be back?
That's right.
He's been a full participant in practice, so that's good there. Now, he's not been good, but he's better than the alternative. Will Jeremiah Byers be back this week? He's inconsistent, but he's better than the alternative. He's better than what you're rolling out there. Doesn't necessarily sound promising, but it was supposed to be a short-term injury, and it's been 2 weeks since they said it was a short-term injury. So, where is he at? You need him back. So if you have that, there's that. I also will say that Alex Atkins coming back again. He's allowed to coach every day but 4 hours on Saturday. I don't think you're going to see a light switch flip in this team, in this offense. I don't think we're going from 15 to 40 just because Alex Atkins came back when he doesn't even call the plays. But it can't hurt. He's still your offensive coordinator. It still probably takes some pressure off of Mike Norvell. It's probably another voice in the headset that can actually tell him things where guys may not be willing to tell him things. He can chew that butt on the offensive line. And because we know he does that. But so I think it's going to be a net positive, just not much of a net positive.
Yeah.
But I agree with you, man. I think my keys for this one are you got to try something on offense. You need to see some wildcat. You need to see some trick plays. You need to do something. You are desperate right now. You are backed into a corner. It is time to let it all hang out. I think you can't lose the turnover battle. We are in agreement on that one because if you're more than 2 or 3 in the turnover battle, you're getting smoked. I mean, you are going to get blown out because your offense is too bad to give them extra possessions. And then I'm with you on the third one too. The pressure numbers that we shared earlier about the pressure to sack percentage and all that they've given up. I think you got to bring the house. You got nothing to lose. They like short passing. They're probably not going to try and get behind your safeties or behind your corners. Put those guys on an island. Look, your linebackers can't cover. So you might as well send them on a blitz.
Right.
I mean, unless it's Blake Nicholson on a tight end, man, if you have Lundy or whoever else in there, man, send them every time. Bring the heat because it's the only thing they can probably do effectively. And you have to stop the run. You can't let them run for over 200 yards or you're cooked in this one. So to me, those are my keys. Now, I do want to say, the one thing that I feel that's like it's a little gut feeling, and that might be a little heartburn. I might need to go take an antacid. There is a slight different energy this week, right? I talked about this on the last episode. Florida State, some of these guys are coming out. They look like they want to fix it. They're agitated with the guys that don't want to play hard or that type of stuff. Maybe they rally the troops this week because eventually, man, you got to get tired of getting your face kicked in. But with that being said, the saying goes, Michael, you can want in one hand and you can do something in the other and you can see what fills up faster. So I don't know that it's going to make a huge difference, but I think if you get Byers back, if you get Washington back, if you give Brock Glenn a look, if you have Alex Atkins back, if there is a different energy, the good news is the practice reports have indicated that defense has had another good week. The bad news is offense still can't catch a pass and the O-line still sucks. I think you're screwed there. I think that's what's going to make it hard for this one. So as we give our pick for this one and we wrap the show up here, look, guys, I gave Florida State the benefit of the doubt last week when I didn't want to. They should have won that game.
Yep.
And they didn't. But I gave them the benefit of the doubt against Memphis. I was like, look, a G5 team coming off a bye week, you should win this game at home. And they lost. They found ways to lose again. Cal is a better team. They're probably more confident. I don't know. Until I see something with Florida State, It's just going to be hard for me to pick them to win. And so, with that being said, Michael, I just want you to know, like, I feel sick right now because I picked us to lose before, right? I picked us to lose by 40 in the Orange Bowl last year. I'm comfortable with doing it. I hate picking against Florida State. I really hate doing it because I love this team. I love this program, and I want to see them turn this around. I can't do it, man. I
Mm.
cannot pick them again when I just haven't seen enough to believe in picking this team. I'm like you last week. I'm not giving them the benefit of the doubt anymore. I said I wasn't going to pick them anymore if they lost that game, and I'm not. Maybe Charleston Southern. We'll revisit then. I hope I'm wrong. I do. I hope I'm wrong with this one. I hope that they come out and they win this one. But because of all the things we talked about, I'm going to go with Cal to win this game and Florida State falls to 0-4. Give me the Bears. I'm going to give it to a close one with Florida State. I still think your defense keeps you in this one, but I'm going to go with Cal 24-21.
Well, Jesse, here's the thing. Florida State's only scored 4 TDs in 3 games this year. They are technically on a 4-game losing streak if you go all the way back to Georgia. If you go back to Georgia in that game, if you go back to that, they didn't score a touchdown in that game either. If you go back to the ACC championship, they only scored 16 points in that game because obviously we were down our star quarterback and we were also down our backup quarterback who's now sucking butt at Southern Miss, right?
Right.
So, with that being said, I haven't seen anything from the practice reports that give me any indication that this offensive line is better or anything that could help me think that Florida State might have a better offensive showing. I do think the defense is improved. So, I am going to go with Cal, and I am picking 17-7. Cal beats Florida State.
Ooh, that's a tough one, man. Low scoring. Actually, I am going to change my score a little bit. I'm going to go 24-20. And the reason that I'm going to go 24-20 is because I don't think we score that many touchdowns. I think you're probably going to want to count on more Ryan Fitzgerald field goals in this one than you are touchdowns because at 21 gives us 3 touchdowns. And, we ain't scoring 3 touchdowns all season. So,
Nah, we're not. Yeah, I don't think we're scoring 3 touchdowns.
yeah,
But
so let me go 24-20. Maybe we
okay.
get in there twice and then we kick 2 field goals too. But yeah, man, it's unfortunate. I hate to be this way. I hate to pick against Florida State, but
Yeah.
again, they haven't given me a reason to pick them. So I hope I'm wrong. It's going to be another one where you're going to be kind of sweating it out on a Saturday night inside Doak Campbell Stadium, 7 p.m. ESPN2, Florida State Cal. That's going to be it for us here on PTS Game Day Week 4. Make sure you go check out our sponsors, the Autograph app, as well as Alumni Hall FSU. Head over to plantthespear.com. Check out our written preview of this Florida State Cal game. Check out that offensive line article we talked about. And, man, I'm hoping for a win. I'm not optimistic.
I'd love it. I'd love it for us to be wrong, but we say that every week and we're not.
Yeah, so we're going with reverse. Well, I'm going with reverse psychology this week. So, with that being said, guys, we're going to end it here. We appreciate you so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the post game show. It's going to be a late night. We'll see how it goes, but we'll be here to react one way or the other. Hopefully, we're actually celebrating a win. Probably not, but we'll be here either way. So, until then, we'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks for watching, and go Noles.
Go Noles.